was ready. The moment God has been waiting for was here at last. God was coming to help his people, just as he promised in the beginning. But how would he come? What would he be like? What would he do? Mountains would have bowed down, seas would have roared, trees would have clapped their hands, but the earth held its breath. As silent as snow falling, he came in, and when no one was looking, in the darkness he came.
Awesome. My beautiful daughter, who was super nervous about that just then, but killed it. Great job. Great job. Well, guys, welcome to our Christmas Eve service. Today is going to be an abridged version of a message, and I know you don't think that I can stay within a time frame, but I can, all right? I'm about to, and hopefully we will be out of here around 5:30, so we'll just have an hour service today. But one thing that we're gonna talk about today, as David said earlier, is love, and I'm so glad that we get the chance to talk about that today. A long time ago, not a whole long time ago, but probably about 4 years ago, when my daughter was about 6 years old, we played hide and seek. Now, in a New York apartment, there aren't a lot of places that you can hide, right? In fact, there were really only about 3, and those just kept getting recycled over and over again. And so whenever you're playing hide and seek, you kind of know where that's going to be, right? But to your 6-year-old daughter, she's hiding in a place that you're never gonna find her because she's just very smart, right? And that's where she's gonna go and hide. And so, as a good parent, I was walking around the house, after I counted to 10, and as loud as I can, slow as I can, and so then I start wandering around the house, and you say things like, "Oh, is she in here? No, she's not in here. Oh, is she here? No, she's not in here." You start looking in these kind of crazy places so that they feel good about where they're hiding, right? This is the way to play hide and seek. Well, after enough time had passed, that kind of makes it fun, I started to search the usual places. And what was interesting is that I couldn't find her. She wasn't in the usual places that she would normally be. And so I kind of start looking other places. I'm like, all right, well, if she's not there, but then there are places you go and you're like, there's no way that she's in there, and there's no way that she can fit in there. And so, where is she? Well, I was genuinely having trouble trying to find my daughter in a 1,000 square foot apartment that has all of these things shoved in random places, right? So then what you do is you're like, okay, maybe she's trying to trick me. So you open the door and you look out into your hallway and you're like, maybe she went outside to try to trick me, right? And then you start looking in ridiculous places like the fire escape, right? Then after a while, I'm tempted to go check to see if her passport's still around, because I'm like, I have no idea where my daughter has gone. So then I'm like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. Process of elimination. I'm gonna start going room by room, and I'm going to start looking very carefully at where she could possibly be. And so I'm going through all the rooms. Finally, I get to her room, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna check this out. I'm gonna see where she is. And there's her closet, right? And I'm like, there's no way that she's in her closet, because there's nowhere for her to fit in her closet. This closet is a normal, again, New York closet. So inside it has blankets, it's got toys, it's got a huge bin with like stuffed animals in it, but it also has an air fryer, and it also has Costco stuff in it, right? Because you just put everything where you possibly can in those moments. And so I opened the closet just to say, maybe there's something that I missed, and I'm looking in the closet, and there's nowhere that she could possibly even fit as a 6-year-old. Cannot find her. And so I start looking, other places, and then finally, I just gave up. I had to give up at hide and seek with a 6-year-old in a small apartment. Like, that should not happen, but it did happen. And so I have to yell, right? It's this yell of shame, and I'm like, Ellie, I can't find you. I give up, right? I've looked in all these places. I'm like, she can't possibly be in there. She can't possibly be in there. So after I've eliminated all these things, I'm like, Ellie, I can't find you. So she comes, of course, running down the hallway, and she's giggling and she's laughing, and she's like, and I was like, oh my gosh, where were you? Like, seriously, like, where were you in this moment? And what had happened was in her room, in that closet, where I said there's no way that she could be in here, that big stuffed animal bin that's in her closet, she had hidden at the bottom of that thing and got her brother to cover her up with all of her stuffed animals. So when I opened that up, all I saw was just what was normal, right? And the moment that I said, there's no way that I'm gonna find her, and it blew my mind that she would even have fit in there in the first place, but that she hid so well. And then she tried to hide there again the next time, and she was busted on that one, right? So, that's just kind of how it goes. But here's the thing. This Advent season, right? We've been looking at the traditional 4 words of Advent that are associated with it. So we've looked at, like David prayed earlier, we looked at hope, we've looked at peace, we've looked at joy, we've also looked at love, and we took 1 week to look at each of those words. And we also looked at a few people as examples of those things, all right? And today, we are going to look at week 4, which is love. Now, here's the thing. We are all in search of, every single person in the world is in search of hope. Every single person is seeking peace. Every single person in the world is seeking joy. It's safe to say that every single person in the world is also seeking love. But the thing is it's like a huge game of hide and seek. We often look at it and go, it can't be there. And it can't be there. But here's the thing about God, and here's the thing about what we've found. Peace, as an example, it wasn't found in the absence of chaos, which is where a lot of people look. I think that peace is in the absence of chaos. And whose life did we look at? Joseph. His life of absolute chaos. And what did we learn about peace? It's actually found in the midst of chaos. Peace was actually found in the midst of chaos. We looked at joy. We saw that it wasn't found in avoiding hard things that God is telling you to do. It's actually found in the obedience of doing the hard things that God asks you to do, right in the middle of them. And the same is true for love. Love is found in the last place you would look. Love is found maybe in a place you've already looked, maybe a place you've already experienced, and then you said, it can't be there. Here's where it's found. Love is found in sacrifice. Love is found in sacrifice. Love is fully gained when it is fully given. And we're going to look at Jesus for that example of love. He is the perfect example of that. Many different people have many different opinions about Jesus, but whether you are a believer or whether you are a skeptic, one thing that we can all agree on is that from what we know about Jesus, he was an incredibly loving individual. I've never met anyone who's even looked remotely at any part of Jesus's life and said, that is a person of evil. That is a person of hatred. If you look at the life of Jesus, you're going to walk away going, wow, that is an extremely loving person right there. You cannot walk away and say, well, that guy didn't care about anybody but himself. Jesus was completely selfless. And Jesus lived the life he lived not only to save us from sin, but as an example to follow. If you want joy in your life, if you want true peace in your life, if you want true love in your life, then look no further than the person of Jesus Christ. Here's what Jesus said. He said, remember, Jesus is the example of love. And I want us to see what he said real quick in John chapter 15, verse 12. This is going to be our main passage we're talking about today. It says this. This is my commandment. He's speaking to his disciples here. And he says, this is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. So if we're looking for love, then we need to look at the way Jesus loved. Because in being love, we are going to find love. In being love, we are going to feel what true love really is. So he was our example. The question we need to be asking is, how did Jesus love? And the answer is actually in the word that he used. Whenever he said right there in that scripture, love each other the same way I have loved you. Remember, Jesus isn't speaking in English here. When we see or say or read the word love in our language, it can mean 1,000 different things because we just see the word love. We just say the word love. We have one word that describes pizza, soap, our pets, our kids, and our moms. Like one word. That's all. We just say love. I love this. I love that. Well, Jesus wasn't just saying it like that. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. You see that in our world today, that's open to major interpretation. Whatever you think love is what you're going to insert right there. But that's not how Jesus meant for us to read this and to see this and for them to see this, right? When Jesus spoke this word to them, he said a word that was an exact descriptor of what he meant. Nothing was left up for interpretation. And the word he used for love meant sacrificial action. That's what that word meant. Sacrificial action. It means intentionality. It means setting your will in motion to be intentionally sacrificial towards other people. Making that determination for yourself. Not just a fluffy feeling. And then here's what also that word means. It also means a sacrificial intentionality that results in joy. That's what that specific word means there. So being intentional with people, being sacrificial towards other in a way that it's going to bring joy. So when Jesus said this, he basically said, sacrifice for each other, be intentional towards each other in this way, and find your joy in one another just as I have loved you. This is how I've treated you. This is how I want you to treat others as well. Here, we're going to look at what sacrificial love is very quickly. And we're not going to take the time to really go in and dive deep into these things, but I think that what we're going to talk about today, I think that, very briefly, what we touch on, I think could revolutionize your life in the love department, all right? So here we go. Sacrificial love. We're going to talk about what it is. Number one, sacrificial love is not based on feeling. Sacrificial love is not based on feeling. In other words, love is not just a good feeling you have towards someone else. That's what we often think of love as, is we think it's this feeling that we have, and we're like, oh, I love you so much, right? That's kind of what we think about love is. Listen to what it is. Love is choosing to sacrifice for someone no matter your feelings towards them. That's what true love is. True love is choosing to sacrifice for someone no matter your feelings towards them. Sometimes even despite your feelings towards someone else. Listen to this as an example. Jesus knew that Judas was going to betray him. Yet, hours before, what do we find Jesus doing? Washing his feet. Jesus already knew he was going to be betrayed. You see, Judas was a person who was very hard to love. It was going to take sacrificial love in that moment for Jesus to wash his feet. I don't know how many of us are strong enough to know I'm about to be betrayed by this person who said they love me, betrayed by this person who said they were for me and has been my friend. I don't know if any of us would have been like, you know what, come here and let me wash your feet. That's what I want to do in this moment, right? That's very difficult, yet that is the kind of love that Jesus is talking about here. You know what? Jesus healed and fed and ministered to people that he knew would eventually be yelling the words, crucify him. Yet that's how he treated them. The Pharisees and the religious leaders, right, of his day who got under his skin probably the most, the ones who claimed to love God but actually loved their lives more. The ones who were responsible for teaching the word of God yet did so for personal gain instead of freeing and in a saving intentionality that it was meant to be given in. And what did Jesus do? He gave his life for them. He gave his life in hopes that they would see the errors of their ways and be saved. That's the kind of love that Jesus calls us to. Love that isn't based on feelings. And guys, I'll be the first one to admit this is something very difficult. There are people in your lives, and let me just say this. There are people in your lives who at the mention of their name or at whenever you're going to see them or you know that they're going to be somewhere, that you have to immediately go into a mode of, oh no. Like person probably popped into your mind. Like whoever that is, right? Like in my life, this is so funny and it's kind of silly, but this is the best example that I can think of in my own life right now. There is a person who lives in our building. Here's the thing. I try to be super kind to every person. Like I try to think of everybody as a 10 at the very beginning, whenever I'm just first meeting them. I'm like, you're a 10. There's one person in our building that the only thing that he has ever said to me, and I've said hello to this person many, many times, all right? Like we'll be passing in the hallway. Like I know he knows me. It's been 4.5 years. Okay, we've lived in the same building. And he's passing me in the hallway and I'm like, hey, how you doing? Nothing. I thought he might be deaf for the longest time. I was like, benefit of the doubt. Maybe he can't hear me, right? No, he can hear just fine. And so I'm like, hey, how's it going? I even use his name. I learned his name. And I said, hey, how you doing? Name? I don't want to say it out loud. But he just walks on past. Well, Tamara and I are walking down the sidewalk the other day, and he passes right by us. We look at him, we say, hey, and I say his name, and my wife goes, hey, how are you? The man just walked right past us. He doesn't have earbuds in. He ain't even trying. Like, he ain't even faking it. All right? This is just what he is. And here's the thing. Do you know what I'm tempted to do? This is so petty. Whenever we have packages at the bottom of our staircase, right, that aren't quite secure yet, I am tempted to take everybody else's package that I know that says hello to me and that we're friends in that building, which is everybody else in that building, and to bring them all inside and leave his out here in the open. Like, that's a temptation I have. I'm like, you don't deserve that. You don't deserve for me to bring this in right now. But you know what? The Lord just continually says, Gregg, love is not based on feelings. It's sacrificial. So I grab that box and I set it inside. You know what sometimes I do if I'm feeling super sacrificial? I take it up to the 3rd floor and I'll put it right in front of his door. You know, sometimes I want to knock on it and just be like, it was me. You're welcome, right? I want to get on his good side so bad. But guys, here's the thing. We have to give even if we don't receive. We have to give even though we don't receive. And sometimes we may not feel like loving, but we have got to love as Jesus loved. Number 2, loving like Jesus means giving. Loving like Jesus is giving. Sacrificial love is giving love. Here's what I mean by that. Giving love is holding everything we own with loose hands. Everything we own with loose hands. It means being willing to part with our money, our time, and our possessions in order to serve other people. Sacrificial love is so giving, and we know, if we know anything about Jesus, we know that describes Jesus. Here's the third one. Sacrificial love, like Jesus, does not discriminate. Sacrificial love does not discriminate. Oh, well, they don't think like me, right? They don't look like me. They don't believe what I believe. They don't see things the way that I see them. They're politically opposed to me. They are morally opposed to me. These are things that we think, and based on those things, we discriminate against other people, and we don't show those people love. Jesus did not have that attitude. Sacrificial love does not discriminate. Also, sacrificial love isn't selective. Sacrificial love isn't selective. What do I mean by that? It doesn't treat someone better or with more respect if they happen to be financially well off. Or maybe they happen to be high up on the social status, whatever that is. Sacrificial love doesn't show partiality. And we look in the book of James, and it talks about how we aren't to be partial to other people based on the things that they have. That's not how Jesus is. That's not how we need to be. And I love the other day whenever we were, out in the park and we were doing our caroling event, and we had all those people there from the neighborhood, and we're singing these Christmas carols, and we're, doing all this stuff. And the picture that is burned into my brain is the homeless guy that I see almost every single day. He's hardly ever sober. And the guy was standing there next to the band, hanging out. And he was so joyful. And he was jumping. And he was dancing. And again, he was intoxicated. And I know that our neighborhood, I know that our people see that guy on a regular basis. And I guarantee those people walk right past him the majority of the time. Yet in a moment, they chose not to be selective in how they loved him. And everybody was still like cautious, right? Because you need to be safe about some things. But whenever they just saw that he was just harmlessly there, what did they do? Man, whenever they were holding their kids at first and being like, I don't know if they should go near him. As the time continued on, they released their kids, and their kids were jumping and dancing with him. For a moment. Love was not selective. Guys, and that's what our whole lives need to be. We don't need to be selective just based on who the person is, how much money they have, what their social status is. We must work to rid our hearts of racial prejudice, socioeconomic snobbery, religious superiority. Those things do not exist in the life of someone who wants to love like Jesus loved. The next one, loving like Jesus, also means that we love someone and that we care enough about the souls of others to tell them the truth. That we'll tell them the truth. The world, as you guys can see, is headed in a direction of defining love as accepting everything someone does. You don't love me if you don't accept everything that I do. But this is not the truth of love, and it's not Jesus' definition of love. It's not the way that he lived his life. Part of Jesus' love was loving people enough to tell them the truth. Loving them enough to tell them the truth. And this is where sacrifice comes in yet again. Why? Because there are a lot of people who reject this kind of love. They don't want to hear the truth. Jesus spoke the truth about sin. He spoke the truth about evil. And he spoke the truth about how a person is at odds with God and can be made right with God. I was having a conversation with a lady the other day, and she just had some questions, and so she asked if I would come and have a conversation with her about some things. She's not a believer, but there are just a lot of things that are happening in the world right now, and she just needed some sense made out of some of it. And her first thing she told me was, she was like, I want you to convince me that there is a God. And I said, well, I can try to do that. And she said, we started talking about all kinds of things. And one thing that I brought up is I said, she said, why are all these evil things happening if there is a God? Or why are all these things happening? And I said, well, there's a lot of evil in the world. And she said, I can't believe that you just said the word evil. She said, I don't hear a lot of people saying the word evil or calling anything evil anymore. And I thought that was so interesting. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she just said, well, I think that everybody just does kind of what they want to do, and nobody is allowed to call anything that anybody else does evil or wrong. I was like, I agree. Right? I was like, I agree with that. And she said, so it's interesting that you call things evil. How do you define evil? And I said, well, I define evil based off of what the Bible says is evil. And I said, and I think that God puts it in many of us to kind of already know what's evil whenever it happens. I said, nobody had to convince me that taking someone else's stuff was wrong. Nobody had to convince me that taking a life of another person is wrong. There are some things that we just know are evil. Nobody had to tell me that I needed to treat people with kindness. Nobody had to tell me that. And she thought that was so incredibly interesting. And she listened and she appreciated calling that out because she could see it. She just was kind of a little bit afraid to call it out. And guys, Jesus spoke about truth. Jesus wasn't afraid to say words like sin. He wasn't afraid to say words like evil. And he spoke the truth about how a person is at odds with God and can be made right with God. And in the end, what happened as he spoke truth? These are ultimately the reasons that he was killed. Speaking truth is sacrificial, but it's love. Speaking truth is sacrificial love. And as you love in this manner as Jesus loved, you're going to get pushback. And many people will not be receptive to it. But again, love, sometimes it takes the sacrifice of that prideful self, that prideful side of us that just wants everybody to accept us, and pushing it aside. We just have to do that. And speaking of that prideful side, the last one, sacrificial love is also forgiving. Sacrificial love forgives. Again, Jesus is a wonderful example of that. No one in the history of the world has been wronged greater than Jesus. Yet among his final words, as he was on the cross, were a prayer for every one of them that said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Even in the middle of being crucified, Jesus had a forgiving spirit towards the very ones responsible. The very ones responsible for him hanging up on that cross. And as I say that, you might get a mental image of who was around and who was responsible for Jesus being on the cross. And you might think of the Roman soldiers, or you might think of the religious leaders, or you might think of the crowd who was yelling, "Crucify him." But before we picture those people, the people that we should picture first and foremost in our mind is ourselves. Because ultimately we are the reason, and we are the ones responsible for Christ having to go to the cross. Jesus took the punishment he took because of the sinful choices that we choose. And you and I are the reason Jesus willingly gave himself. It was to save us. And that is ultimate sacrifice. That is ultimate sacrifice. That is ultimate love, and that is our greatest example. And God may never call us to give our lives for someone else, but he does call us to be sacrificial. He does call us to be loving in a sacrificial way. Not just whenever we want to be, not just with the people that are easy to love. The Bible talks about that too. Don't just love the people who are easy to love. Love your enemies is what Jesus taught. So it's more than a feeling. It's more than any of these other things. It takes real sacrifice. And guys, there should be no greater example in our world today of sacrificial love than Christians, than believers, than Christ followers. He has called us to be this. And you know what's cool about Scripture is it actually says loving each other will show the world of the truth of Christ. That kind of love will show, our love for one another will show and be evidence of the truth of the gospel and the truth of Christ. So, this isn't just a Christmas message, you know. It's for some reason easier to be sacrificially loving during Christmas. So this isn't just a Christmas message, and sometimes we might sit here and we might go, yeah, that's good. No, when this needs to come into practice is January 1st. That is a Monday. And you know that you've got all this stuff coming up. When you see other people, how can you love them no matter what?